With the second pick in the 2023 NBA Draft, the Charlotte Hornets selected Brandon Miller, the 6'9" sweet shooting wing out of Alabama. Miller was considered the consensus best college prospect in the 2023 draft class, the operative word here being college, considering we had a lot more prospects in this past draft come from different leagues. Miller was a controversial pick at 2. For a lot of the year, most draft buffs considered the deep 2023 draft to be a two-player draft, with Victor Wembanyama being the best prospect, followed by Scoot Henderson. And then of course there was a lot of other high-level prospects. Miller started being heavily linked to the Hornets at the second pick, and even more so after multiple workouts with the team. And on draft night, the Hornets pulled the trigger and selected Miller, and that triggered strong reactions from fans who wanted Scoot Henderson at 2.
The Charlotte Hornets select Brandon Miller.
It was an unpopular pick to say the least. However, it's the kind of pick you can at least see the vision. I would have drafted Scoot at 2, and I would take Scoot long term, as much as I like Brandon Miller, and as much as I would be high on a player like Brandon Miller. But I could see why the Hornets decided to go with Miller, even if I disagree with the pick. Instead of lamenting the fact that the Hornets didn't take Scoot, I want to talk about Miller and how he fits on the Hornets, because he still has a very nice skill set at the end of the day. I watched some Alabama games and rewatched the NCAA tourney game against SDSU, and rewatched some Summer League games, so I want to give my assessment and talk about how I see Miller fitting on the Hornets, and how I see him playing off of his best teammates like LaMelo Ball. So let's talk some Brandon Miller. It should be obvious, but Brandon Miller's ability as a shooter is something I see translating easiest for him as he heads into his rookie year. The shot and the mechanics comes easy to him. He gets square in any situation, and the shot is a quick release. It's clear that Brandon Miller has a natural comfort and knack in any type of scenario shooting the ball. Catch and shoot, coming off of pin downs, handoffs, shooting transition threes, and threes off the dribble. Alabama weaponized Miller's shooting and the variety of ways he can get his shot off. He shot 38% from 3 on 7.5 attempts per game in his sophomore year at Alabama, and he shot 39% on catch and shoot threes. That's impressive considering that he was the main focus of attention from opposing teams, and Miller dealt with not so great point guard play. To me, Miller is very easily someone I can see having multiple seasons shooting 40% from 3, especially since he'll be playing off the spacing and passing provided from LaMelo, Terry Roizer, Gordon Hayward, and the athletic rim-running bigs the Hornets have. Imagine running a set like the one Alabama runs here. And just imagine replacing the point guard and the center with LaMelo and the high-flying dunking machine Mark Williams, who really broke out after he was inserted into the starting lineup back in February. Miller's shooting gives the Hornets a nice versatile piece to construct sets that will utilize the attention he gets as a shooter to benefit the other guys on the roster, and vice versa. As a team, the Hornets were 18th in the league in three-point attempts, 27th in makes, and they barely beat out the Houston Rockets for 29th in three-point percentage. Miller is definitely going to help out the Hornets in that department. This was something that stuck out to me even in the college and summer league games where he struggled shooting, but Miller is a very adept and good passer. It's not going to show in his college numbers, but in the film I saw, he is good at making passes on the move with either hand, and has no problem being the connecting passer that ultimately leads to an open shot. Miller's feel for the game is apparent. He can also make the simple reads in the half court and transition. I have seen him make some passes out of the pick and roll, but I have also seen him get stonewalled in the pick and roll, and this is something that I'm going to bring up later. But I question Miller's ultimate upside as a primary initiator because he doesn't appear to have that top-end burst needed to get separation. He does have a competent enough handle to work his snaking game into the pick and roll, which is something I noticed he is very comfortable doing in the pick and roll, but it's what happens after Miller gets the defender on his hip that it sort of becomes an adventure. Miller can attack a closeout and make the correct decision on the move, but I don't think the role of lead playmaker is going to be in the works for him. But as he matures and gets some seasons and reps under his belt, I can see the Hornets using his playmaking skills to great effect in a tertiary role playing off better players, where at Alabama, he was asked to create in a role that he most likely won't see right away or maybe ever in the NBA. Did you guys know that the Hornets had the 7th best defensive rating post All-Star break? And that's with the Hornets basically dwelling in the bottom 10 of the league in defense the last 2 weeks of the season. So if you want to take those last 2 weeks out, from February 24th to March 30th, the Hornets have the 2nd ranked defensive rating in the NBA per cleaning the glass. So you can see why the Hornets went with Brandon Miller as the 2nd pick. He was one of the best two-way prospects in the draft not named Victor Wembanyama. Miller has good defensive instincts. Off the ball is what stuck out to me watching Miller, as he constantly communicated with his teammates and seemed to be part of a switching scheme that he had down pat. Miller is also very good at using his length and quick feet. Miller has made it very clear that Paul George is his favorite player. And as a day one Paul George fan myself, I can tell in the way that Miller moves his feet that he stole that part of Paul George's game. It seems like Miller glides in his lateral movement. He moves on the balls of his feet and is always alert to move when the player he is guarding is making a cut or a move towards the basket or is involved in any type of action. He also has that give a shit and competitive fire you like to see in a player, and at the very least, that should be a quality Hornet fans will appreciate, because I think head coach Steve Clifford is going to appreciate it right away. Now, Miller is skinny in the legs and the upper body, so he can get moved easily, especially if he switches on to a bigger player or the ball handler he is guarding puts his shoulder into him on a drive to the basket. But as he gets more reps and fills out his body to improve his functional strength, his versatility as a switching wing should improve as well. Brandon Miller also gets after it on the glass, on both the defensive end and the offensive end of the floor. This is where I see the magic happening for the Hornets. Brandon Miller is an awesome player in transition, and that's going to fit right in with a Hornets team that was 9th in pace last year. It's not just Brandon Miller's offensive tools that pop in transition, it's the feel. Grabbing the board and feeling out whether it's best to take it coast to coast or outlet it up ahead to fill a lane knowing you're going to get the ball back. Being a trail three-point shooter, relocating on the three-point line in semi-transition. Miller averaged 1.2 points per possession in transition during his sophomore year at Alabama. You can just see how that's going to fit well in a high-paced style playing off of a point guard with elite vision like LaMelo Ball. There are plenty of good things Brandon Miller can do offensively that could be utilized by the Hornets, but there are some very valid concerns, however, that could limit Miller's ultimate upside. The first thing that was instantly noticeable to me is that Miller doesn't have that explosive burst on his first step. If he gets ahead of steam in transition, the lack of top-end athleticism and explosion isn't as noticeable, but in the half court, the lack of quick step and the lack of explosion finishing at the cup are apparent. If Miller does get a step on somebody, the defender can recover and use their physicality to bother his airspace. He ended up having to shoot some tough floaters and tough layups in summer league and in college where he just couldn't get that last oomph to power through and finish at the cup. He has a tendency to fade from contact, and I know some college buffs will point out that Miller's finishing did get better as the season went on, but he still wasn't great overall on the year. Having limited athleticism and having concerns about that can be a tricky thing, because it's not the end-all be-all, but it definitely helps, especially if you're struggling and you need to find a way to impose your will on the game, as the good old sports clichés like to say. Miller graded out as a below-average ISO player, and his lack of true explosion and athleticism is partly the reason why. Miller's inefficient finishing at the rim is also a concern, because that is actually a weak point to track with LaMelo Ball and a Hornets team that was 25th in rim field goal percentage. Now, there are some things to alleviate those concerns, like LaMelo not only 1, staying healthy, 2, making a concerted effort to get to the rim more, but 3, utilizing that floater that we saw in LaMelo's rookie year and more so in his second year. Miller could also see improvement as a finisher because of the extra space he'll be afforded in NBA games, and as his career goes, I can see Miller getting stronger and weaponizing his shooting touch to improve on floaters and maybe make some of those tough contested layups more often. Mark Williams should be penciled in as the starting center, and that should help too, considering that 78% of Mark Williams' field goal attempts came at the rim in his rookie year, and he shot 70%. So there are some low-hanging fruit for the Hornets to pick at to improve their rim finishing as a whole. Ultimately, I see why the Hornets picked Brandon Miller. He is a big 6'9" wing that can shoot the leather off the ball and can defend. It's an extremely enticing skill set. And if you look at the other young teams that have big guards and wings across the board, like the Thunder for example, or the Houston Rockets, or the Detroit Pistons, the Hornets may be following that mold. LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, Brandon Miller, Cody Martin, and Miles Bridges, who really shouldn't be in the league, but that is the unfortunate reality as he is still on this team, all range from 6'5" to 6'9" and can do different things on the court, and that doesn't include the versatile PJ Washington, who is a restricted free agent and has yet to get an offer sheet from a team or sign the qualifying offer with the Hornets. Throw in Mark Williams, Nick Richards, and a sprinkle of JT Thor junk it up minutes, and mix in some explosive quick guard play from Terry Roizer and rookie Nick Smith Jr., who showed some slick scoring prowess in Summer League, you can see the vision, even if you're like me and disagree with the pick and would have drafted Scoot Henderson at 2. Time will ultimately tell if the Hornets saw things correctly, but that limited explosion and athleticism connecting to the ability to finish around the rim at an efficient rate is going to be the question with Miller for the rest of his career, and in my opinion, that will be the swing skill to determine whether he can ultimately be a main initiator from the wing. That to me is what will be the line in the sand between Brandon Miller being a good player that can squeak onto a couple of all-star teams in his career, or a perennial All-NBA caliber player.